I've been reading Malcolm Gladwell's latest book, Talking to Strangers. And I have to confess that I agree with some of the reviewers who say that what the examples that he gives don't prove his actual point. But nonetheless, he is a really compelling storyteller. In the book, he gives example after example of ways that people trust their guts when it comes to evaluating the trustworthiness of other people, often to their own detriment. Consider, he says, the case of Bernie Madoff, the head of that Ponzi scheme a few years back. The people who invested money with Bernie Madoff, for the most part, knew him. And they invested money with him because they knew him, because they trusted him, even though they confessed afterwards that they knew at the time they did not have any idea how he was creating the returns that he was promising. That part of them knew that what he was promising, what he was saying was impossible, but because they had this gut feeling, they trusted him and they believed that rather than the available evidence, rather than their better judgment. Folks who never met Bernie Madoff looked at his reports, listened to what he said he was doing, couldn't understand it, and decided not to invest money with him because they had never met him. Or take, for example, judges in courtrooms who, for the most part, believe that they have a good sense when someone is standing before them, whether they are likely to reoffend, when they're making decisions about granting parole, whether the person standing before them is likely to be free on parole and reoffend or not. Studies have shown that actually computers are better at making that decision. Computers who just take into account the data, the information, the history of the person, and don't look them in the eyes or look them in the face and make a gut judgment. But judges feel that that's really important, that they trust their gut, they trust their instinct, they put faith in that. Or most famously perhaps, take for the example of Adolf Hitler. Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister in Great Britain after Hitler invaded the German-speaking parts of Czechoslovakia, traveled to Berlin to meet Hitler. He wanted to get his sense of the man. He wanted to look Hitler in the eyes. He wanted to shake Hitler's hand and see whether he believed that Hitler could be trusted, that that was the extent of it, that Hitler was not going to invade anywhere else. Chamberlain traveled to Berlin. He looked Hitler in the face, he shook his hand, he came back and said that he believed that Hitler was trustworthy. He trusted his gut, he put faith in his own personal assessment about him. And just so we don't all blame Chamberlain, which history has done, that was actually the case of nearly everyone in the British leadership who went to Berlin and met Hitler. Nearly everyone who met him thought that he could be trusted. They believed that he was a trustworthy person. They trusted their gut. They put faith in that. In fact, it was only people who didn't meet Hitler, most famously Winston Churchill, who never trusted him. Churchill just looked at what he was doing and didn't trust him. I think this question about what we put our faith in, and I, just like these people in the book, I put a great deal of faith in my instincts about other people and about things. The book has kind of set me back a little bit about that, and I've been trying to think about ways to check that. But I suspect you do as well. You trust your gut. You put faith in your instinct when it comes to other people, when it comes to making decisions in this life. I think that's what's going on in this story we just heard from Luke's Gospel. The disciples are trying to figure out what to put their faith in. And they say to Jesus, "Increase our faith." And they do this, I think, because they are tired and they're stressed out. Jesus has been asking them to do some pretty difficult, some pretty impossible things. He's invited them to go out 2 by 2 without an extra change of clothes, without any food, and just rely on the hospitality of the people they come to meet. They are to walk into a village, and if they are welcome, fine, and if not, they're to turn around and leave. And they find that they are not welcome places, and that they are hungry, that this is hard, lonely work. Jesus has told them that they are to forgive each other and to forgive others, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 7 times. But 7 times, 70 times. Over and over and over again. And the disciples just frankly don't feel like forgiving people over and over again. People who continue to do them wrong. People who continue to do bad things. They're not interested in doing that. They find it hard. And yet Jesus commands them to do that. So they think that the problem is they don't have enough faith. I've been wondering this week what kind of faith it is that they don't think they have enough of. We think about faith, you and I probably most regularly, as things that we believe in, things that we give our intellectual assent to. We believe in God. We believe that Jesus was God's Son, and the like. If the disciples were having trouble with that kind of faith, boy, we're all in trouble. The disciples spent time with Jesus in the flesh. They saw what Jesus could do. They saw Jesus healing the sick. They saw the ways that Jesus transformed the lives of those he came into touch with. He saw the ways in which Jesus was able to turn people's perspective on upside down to get them to see this life through God's eyes. If the disciples were still having trouble with that kind of faith, then we're all in a lot of trouble. So then I wonder if it's the disciples were having trouble with the kind of faith that is trust in God. If you've ever tried to teach a young person how to swim, you know that the first thing that you have to do is get them to trust that if they relax, they will float. But if they're thrashing about, they're going to go under the surface of the water. Similarly, God is that water that we swim in. We have to learn to trust that God is buoyant, that we will float. All of our anxiety is just our ways of thrashing about in this life, and it gets us in trouble. We start getting dragged below the surface. Maybe the disciples were asking Jesus to increase their trust in God. Or maybe the disciples were asking Jesus to increase their fidelity, to strengthen their relationship with God, their commitment of the heart, their loyalty to God. Their fidelity in the same way that you and I are faithful to spouses or to family members and friends. Maybe the disciples were realizing or worrying that it was all the ways that they were unfaithful to God that was getting them into trouble. That meant they didn't have what they needed to do the work that God had given them to do. Or perhaps the disciples wanted more of that vision of faith, that ability to see the world as God sees it. I've taken these from a really excellent book I commend to you called The Heart of Christianity by Marcus Ward. And Ward says that there are 3 ways that we can look at the world. 3 big ways. One, we can look at the world, we can look at reality as essentially malevolent, as out to get us. If we look at life that way, what we do is try and build fortresses around ourselves, create a little safety and security, tend to our own house. Or we can look at the world as being neutral, neither really good or bad. And that's maybe a little better than thinking that everything's out to get us, but we then probably go down the path of looking for things we enjoy, not worrying too much when things go bad because the ship will right itself eventually, and just floating along. Or, Borg says, we can look at the world the way that God looks at it, as essentially good, as essentially life-giving and nourishing. That reality has brought us and everything else that we know into existence and will care for us. That reality is beautiful. Sometimes it's a terrible sort of beauty. That reality will take care of us. If we have that kind of vision, if we have that kind of faith, then we are more able to live the lives that God has called us to live. Whatever kind of faith the disciples are looking for when they ask Jesus to increase their faith, I'm certain that his answer did not satisfy him. He says, look, if you had just faith the size of a mustard seed, you'd be able to move this mulberry tree from where it's planted to the ocean. I don't know about you, I have no desire to do that kind of bizarre landscaping, and I don't think any of the disciples did either. Then he goes on to tell this story about Master. He says to him, who of you has a slave who when they come in from working in the fields, you say, well done, good and faithful servant, sit down and have dinner? No, he says, you expect them to get dinner on the table for you and clean things up, and then when you're done, later in the evening, they can sit down and eat themselves. we have to peel a whole lot back from that. So this master-slave relationship brings up slavery in this country. Slavery in Jesus' time was very common, but it wasn't based on the color of your skin. Rather, you fell into slavery because you fell into debt, which was pretty common, or maybe you'd been captured in a war. Slavery was a time-limited sort of thing, 7 or 10 years, and then you were free. And slavery was viewed as a relationship between two people, the master and the slave. The slave had responsibilities to do the work that was laid out. The master had responsibilities, reciprocal responsibilities, to take care of the slave. What Jesus is saying, in essence, to the disciples is, don't look to God to say, great job, because you've just done what God asked you to do. Jesus says with these two little sayings, look, you've got what you need. You've got just the faith, the little tiny little speck of faith that you have is enough to do the work that God has given you to do. It's not going to be easy. It is like toiling in the field all day and then coming in and having to make dinner and clean up. But that life of faith has its own reward. The life of faith that is rooted in worship and in prayer and rooted in the practice, rooted in a life of compassion and justice. I pray that this week we will pray to God to increase our faith, knowing that we already have enough. And that we reflect on what kind of faith it is that we most want. Is it the faith that says, I believe in whatever? Is it the faith that puts our trust in God, that trusts in the buoyancy of God? Is it the faith that strengthens our fidelity to God, our relationship with God? Or is it the faith that helps us see the world as God sees it? See reality as God sees it, as essentially good and graceful. Whatever kind of faith it is that we need, I hope that we will pray on it, that we will receive it, and it will help us live the lives that God calls us to, lives of worship and of prayer, and lives of a commitment to compassion and justice. Amen.
Amen.